Welcome to Building Web3. Today we have Connor, co-founder of Enso Finance, which has processed more than 15 billion in transaction volume. Enso simplifies dApp and chain interactions for developers, and you're going to see some serious alpha being dropped on this episode. But remember, nothing stated is financial advice. Welcome to the Building Web3 podcast. Today we have my good friend Connor with us. He's going to be telling us about his very exciting company called Enso. Before we get too deep into Enso, could you give us a brief introduction into your background and what was your come to crypto moment?
Sure. So I'm Connor Howe, one of the co-founders of Enso. I've been building full-time on Ethereum for the last 8 years. So I got exposed to Ethereum in 2016 by one of my university professors. I wrote a thesis topic on Ethereum back in 2016, and my first exposure to crypto was actually in 2013, 2012, primarily from running bot farms on RuneScape and World of Warcraft. So during high school times and college days, I enjoyed to play games a lot, but I didn't really want to spend the time to level up all my accounts. So I would write scripts, they would play the accounts for me, and then at a certain stage and level of the gold in the accounts, I would then sell these accounts in gold for Bitcoin. That was my first exposure. I was very passionate about cybersecurity, and that came very hand in hand with crypto. But really, ever since I've graduated university, I've only been working in the Web3 space.
Wow. I've talked to so many founders, and it does seem that gaming is just... for what reason is a big inroad into Bitcoin and the cryptocurrency space? I assume because there's already essentially like a primitive form of cryptocurrency in those types of games.
Yeah, it really is. These games have their own mini economies. So you've got RuneScape Gold, you've got World of Warcraft Gold, Guild Wars, and so forth. And let's say you want to exchange from one game to another game, because gamers generally play many different games at once. Bitcoin was a great form to do that. So it was literally used as a middle currency that was neutral to all of these games, so then interchange over each platform. I think a lot of gamers found out about crypto because we spent 15, 16 hours a day on the computer, right? If you're going on deep forums, you're going on botting forums, you're learning about coding, eventually you get so far down a rabbit hole that you explore Bitcoin. And it's not that you Googled Bitcoin, you came across Bitcoin on a gaming forum or somebody in the game mentioned. So these exposures in the early days of crypto, I think gaming was a big part.
Absolutely. So you get into gaming, you're introduced to Bitcoin, and then your university professor kind of teaches you more about cryptocurrency. You end up writing a thesis on Ethereum and Bitcoin. Talk about what was your first job in Web3, or did you immediately go on to start Enso?
Yeah, so during my university days, I was really big in cybersecurity. I'd worked at one of the largest cybersecurity firms in the UK. And whenever the thesis topic came up, I was trying to explore, what should I do? Is there any ideas? And universities generally put up some ideas for the students to get some inspiration from. And it was one about Bitcoin. I was like, okay, so I know Bitcoin. I've been dabbling in it a couple of years. This could be relevant. I enjoy this technology. And I went to go and speak to the professor and said, I've been using Bitcoin for the last 4 years. And he said, well, okay, we could do about Bitcoin. And he said, have you heard about Ethereum? And I said, no, what's Ethereum? That's a weird word. What does that mean? And back in that day, there was no IDE plugins. So there was no Visual Code plugins, Sublime Text, Atom. There was the only place to write Solidity was in a wallet. And the wallet was called Mist Wallet. So this was created by Fabian, who's also one of the co-creators of ERC20 standard. And it literally held your Ethereum and also had inside a place to write Solidity. And that's kind of where I learned what Ethereum was. The professor such didn't really create lectures on blockchain, but it was more like a one-to-one interaction of how I explored crypto. And then on the first job that I'd done outside of university was straight into Web3. I had a job offer for cybersecurity, and I already accepted the offer, but then I was offered a job in crypto. super high risk, back in that day, really crypto was fully perceived as a scam by a lot of people. Nowadays, not so much. And I moved from Scotland, where I'm originally from, over to Prague for this random crypto company that was tokenizing IoT devices. So it was DePIN before DePIN was a trend. And this was 7 years ago, actually. And nowadays you see all these DePIN projects, and it was good fun to work on that. Enso was started 3 years ago. And prior to starting Enso, I helped build a fully regulated crypto bank here within Switzerland, where I helped build their cold storage, hot storage, secondary exchange, multi-sig, fully collateralized stablecoin, with the Swiss franc stored in the Swiss National Bank. So to answer your question, I've been literally day one at university has been full-time crypto.
Perfect. And I always like this podcast to be relatively accessible to people that maybe are newer to the crypto space. So DePINs, let's say decentralized financial infrastructure, we could think of essentially like a decentralized AWS or a decentralized cloud provider. And then you mentioned a few other things. So cold wallets. So you were building a bank. People don't want to store their wallets pretty much connected to the internet because they could get hacked. So that was a big focus for banks. And then you mentioned multi-sig. Could you please define multi-sig real quick?
Yeah, multi-sig is, let's say you and a friend want to share a wallet together. So you and me, Jax, we could create a safe. It's actually called safe.global. It's a multi-sig, the largest in the whole ecosystem. I believe they have over $120 million inside of their smart contracts as of today. And you and me would deposit funds inside of that. Once we deposit funds and we create this smart account, this multi-sig, we define the rules of engagement inside of this. So maybe we want both of us to sign a transaction before the real transaction can be submitted. So let's say we store 100K inside and I want to send 100K to party B, then you need to approve this payment before it gets transferred, right? This is kind of the core premise of multi-sigs. But you don't inherently need to have this with another person. You can also do this for your own wallets. So let's say you want to have geo redundancy, you want to have different backup methods for your 100K that's sitting inside of this. I may have a physical ledger or nano, whatever it may be. Then I may have a cold storage solution. Then I may have a hot wallet, and then I may use another custodian. And I can say, only if I have access to 2 of those 4 devices at this point in time, then a transaction can be submitted. So it's a security mechanism to prevent against spam attacks or even losing your own wallets. And for people who aren't aware of what spanner attacks are, especially is essentially coming along and saying, if somebody comes to my house with a spanner, can they get all my crypto, right? If I'm literally in a physical situation that people are forcing me life or death. And if you have geo redundancy of all of your different wallets in one multi-sig, then that attack cannot happen.
Absolutely. Yeah, we in the US tend to call it a wrench attack. So if someone shows up with like a tool, they want to hit you over the head with it, like, give me all of your coins. Yeah, I literally can't. I have to. There's multiple signatures that have to go into this.
It happens a lot. It happens a lot in Sweden, actually. So it was a trend, I think, last year or earlier this year. Sweden, with every single person, you can put in their name and find out where they live. So if you're a Web3 founder or you're a Web3 influencer, whatever it may be, or you flaunt your wealth on Instagram, people were literally flying over to Sweden to take them hostage to get the funds. So this is a real thing and not a made-up idea of crypto ideology and protecting yourself.
Yeah, it seems so interesting. I live in Medellin, Colombia. So for the South American friends in the audience, we know this is a real thing. We're surprised to hear maybe it's a thing in Europe, but yeah, we have no delusion about that these things occur. So everyone gets a multi-sig on your wallet. So you end up helping build the bank in, what was that, Switzerland? And then what led you to start Enso?
Yeah, so Enso's went through many different iterations to get to where it is as of today. Back 3 years ago, DeFi was really just starting. And I saw this as the real use case for luck, I personally. Decentralized finance, having your self-sovereignty, being able to interact with any protocol, being able to take loans, being able to generate yields without having to go through a third party and requesting their approval. And if you go through generally banks, you're not getting big rates, right? So I was very early into DeFi, and I was farming like day one balancer, finding exploits in token economics and so forth, and also buying some of these tokens. So I was also buying like Avi tokens and so forth whenever it's super low price. And my colleagues actually in that bank wanted to send me some of their personal money so I can manage. Same with my friends, same with my family. So Enso started off as a social trading product where I could create a strategy, an investment strategy, and others could invest into this, right? So it's like asset management. We launched this. We got a little bit of usage. We got about 8-9 million TVL, not that much, but we wanted to have more of DeFi. So DeFi has 10,000, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60,000 of different protocols you can interact with. We'd spent over a year building 15 DeFi protocol integrations, spending over $500,000 on audits, and DeFi moves very fast. If you're needing to spend a month, 2 months of integrating, waiting for audit slots, having these audit feedback and then redeploying and so forth, it's not really scalable for interacting with DeFi. So we rebuilt everything from scratch to then offer one holistic interface to interact with DeFi. So you can imagine it as a super app, right? One place you can go to do lending, borrowing, swapping, LPs, vaults, all through one place. So it's a convenience product. But the architecture we built underneath enabled us to interact with the DeFi protocol very quick. So our record time from a customer request to release for a DeFi protocol was 30 minutes. Before, that would have taken us a month and a half. So we had this beautiful architecture underneath. With the DeFi interface, we didn't get that much adoption. We saw how users were interacting with it. And truthfully, it was just airdrop farmers. They were not using that product because they saw value in it. They were only using it to get free money, which I have some personal opinions about that in this industry, but I think that's a whole different other topic. And whilst building this DeFi UI, we spoke to other projects, the team, and said, how do you get users, right? Because we're in this product discovery phase, we pivoted. And there was 2 responses that we got. One response was launch a token and artificially create product market fit. And we proactively decided from day one, we will not launch a token up until we find product market fit. The second response was, oh, wow, you have many DeFi protocols integrated. We have a problem in integrating all of DeFi. So we spun up an API within 2 weeks. And then the first week, we accumulated more volume than the whole inception of the company for those 2 products. So that's kind of where Enso ended up, as this DeFi middle layer, enabling application developers to embed DeFi primitives into the product. And now we kind of entered into this phase of intent and so forth.
Yeah, and I think it would be really helpful for people to understand why is this necessary. Like, let's walk through an example of an application developer or a decentralized application developer, and why they would need to use all of these different protocols, and why they might even need to use them cross chain.
Yeah, I mean, if you're offering a wallet, you can decide not to offer any DeFi, and you can just store tokens. Okay, that's fine. How many wallets have that? Thousands, tens of thousands. What's your differentiating factor there? Not that much. Purely just marketing and maybe a token to incentivize people to keep their funds there. Maybe a better user experience. You can differentiate your product by offering retention mechanisms inside. So if a user has USDC, why would they just want to hold USDC whenever they could be generating a yield on this? Maybe depositing into Avi, into Euler, into Convex, into all these different DeFi protocols. So you're giving this retention mechanism for users. If you're wishing to integrate all of these DeFi protocols, 1, you need to know about those protocols. 2, you need to understand how to integrate them. 3, you need to build manual smart contract integrations and adapters. 4, you also need to have audit slots and get it audited, which is also a monetary overhead. And then the last but not least is also maintenance. We know one of the largest wallets They'd integrated Uniswap V1. Took them 4 or 5 months, and then Uniswap V2 came out. It was a week after they'd already released their integration. So all that months of work was now useless. They had to rebuild everything from scratch again. So instead of these developers building these integrations and maintaining themselves, they can just call our infrastructure. We build those integrations for them. And if we build an integration into Uniswap V3 or V4, whatever it may be, then all of our customers get that integration as well. So it's this one source to then interact with all of DeFi.
Yeah, the way I think about it coming from more of the Web 2 space, if we have some developers that are relatively new to the crypto ecosystem, is think about like a kind of like a Zapier or a Segment or an mParticle, where it's one central hub where you can essentially piggyback off all of these APIs or all of these like SDKs that have already been integrated into one core platform. And you can essentially just say like, hey, I want to connect to Google, or like, I want Google Analytics. I don't care exactly how you do it. Just do it essentially. And then you guys figure out the underlying implementation of that and maintain those connections for them.
Exactly. It's a convenience product. It inherently doesn't make any sense for developers to rebuild everything over and over and over again whenever we can have a common shared space and plug and play all of our integrations together.
Yeah. And let's talk a little bit about the cross-chain capabilities, because that's one interesting thing that if people are coming from more of the Web 2 space, they might not be, or people, if they're in Web 3, they might be like, well, I'm familiar with bridging. Why would you need to have this shared state across many different disparate blockchains?
So I think the ecosystem is going through an interesting journey right now. It's really a multi-chain future. You're having many services called RAS, roll up as a service, that enable developers to go to a simple interface, select their blockchain name, what type of blockchain it is, and within 2-3 minutes deploy all their own blockchain, right? It's kind of Wix or WordPress, but not for websites, but for blockchains. So what this is turning into is thousands and thousands and thousands of different blockchains, which results in fragmentation. It's fragmentation because each blockchain has its own individual state. By state, let's say Aave is deployed on Ethereum, but Aave is not deployed on Connor's blockchain. Connor's blockchain does not have Aave. So users are fixated on the concept of only interacting on Ethereum because Aave is there. So you need a tool to be aware of all the different protocols and all the different chains. If you're a developer and you're wanting to embed many different blockchain products into your application, you're needing to not only integrate all of these products, i.e. Aave, you're also needing to integrate all of these different blockchain frameworks now. And what the Enso intent engine does is abstract all of this logic away for you. So instead of you needing to understand all these chains, maintain all that infrastructure, integrate all of these protocols, you can just call one source. Say, I want to interact with Aave on Ethereum, and I also want to interact with Aave on Arbitrum and Uniswap on Connor's chain, right? We will then generate all the information on how you execute and then give it back to you. On the cross-chain side itself, we don't inherently do cross-chain. The cross-chain providers like aggregators like Socket, Li-Fi, dBridge, we're kind of a provider underneath to be able to build the call data for how you interact on these individual chains as such. Users inherently shouldn't need to care what chain they're operating on in the future. It should be fully abstracted away for them underneath.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about, are they as explicit? Let's say we'd have this Connor chain example where you're like, hey, I want an ability for my users to get some kind of yield. I know Aave exists. Are they as explicit when they submit their intent saying like, I want yield generation on Aave? Or are they saying, hey, I want to get like a certain percentage of yield, or hey, I want to do some kind of yield farming?
It's a really great question. The Enso intent engine is a bit more explicit. So you'll say, I want to go and interact with this protocol, and maybe there's 4 or 5 prerequisites to interact with that protocol. So for example, Beefy DeFi protocol on Ethereum, it's called Beefy. Some pools require an aura position, which then requires a balancer position that requires 2 tokens. So if a developer was to build that interaction themselves, or even a user to interact, they would need to swap into 2-3 different tokens, go to balancer interface, do 2 different approvals, do 1 transaction, then go over to Aura interface, approve the token, and do another transaction, then go to Beefy, and you kind of do this over, right? So that user experience doesn't inherently make sense. On the developer side, you need to build an integration into each individual one. So with the Enso Intent Engine, you can just specify where you want to interact with. So you will define, I want to interact with Beefy, right? But the tools that are being built on top of Enso are turning into 3 different types of intents. You've got explicit intent. I want to generate this yield on Aave. So I want to deposit this token on Aave to generate this yield, right? Semi-explicit is I want to generate this yield on a lending protocol. And by the word choice of semi-explicit, it implies the lending protocol could be Morpho, Aave, Spark, Maker, could be all of the variations, as long as this prerequisite that's been defined as I want to generate this APY. Now, what people could do on top of this as well is add more variables. So as long as the protocol has been live for 1 year, it's got 2 audits, it's got this amount of TVL, so you can create these conditions. Non-explicit is AI feature. So an AI execution bot is listening to your previous behavior to understand how you would act under certain market conditions. So if your Aave position goes down to 2%, then what would you have done, right? And it creates this behavioral analysis and prediction markets of you as a human being to then act on your behalf. So maybe you would have withdrawn at 2%. So then it would move your position to another DeFi protocol. So the Enso engine itself, you need to specify, you need to be explicit, but people are building tools on top, more like DSLs, to then convert what that user request is into their format, into the Enso format. So we have a great project called Brian Knows AI. They're building a full text to action. So you can type, I want to swap this amount of tokens to this token on this chain. And they convert in their machine learning model into the Enso format to then call it Enso.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit about, so we've got the intents. I think all listeners will kind of understand, hey, you want to generate some kind of yield, or hey, I want to swap these tokens, and maybe I don't care about the underlying implementation, or I say like, hey, I want to lend on Aave, and that would be a bit more explicit. Let's talk a little bit about the people that are building these integrations. Is it the Enso development team that's largely building these integrations, or are they more providing, we'll call it like the marketplace or the central hub in which many people can submit these integrations to? If you think about the Zapier existence, some companies write their integrations for Zapier. Zapier maintains some core integrations as well.
Yeah, so there's 2 different components to this. One, you have the centralized API, the service that most people use as of today. We, the Enso developers, build that. So we can just add this abstraction. Once we add this into our graph, then all routes are aware of this graph, of this edge inside of the graph. So it can be combined with many different combinations of smart contracts. Whenever it comes to the network that will be launched in the next couple of months, anyone can come along and contribute. So let's say you're a developer and you want to monetize your knowledge on DeFi or NFTs, or even how to interact with particular smart contracts. You can come along to the Enso network and say, here's how you lend on Aave. You just add this like individual execution into the Enso graph. Once that's inside of there, any intent request that came into the network that uses your contribution inside of the solution, you will get a percentage of the fee. So if you're a good developer, ideally you would come along to network and you would add as many abstractions as you can. So you would add all of the lending protocols, all of the NFT protocols, any smart contract abstraction into the Enso network, so you can actually get fees of all the solutions that are being consumed. So it creates this open ecosystem that everyone can start contributing.
Got it. And I assume, is there any competition between, I would assume multiple people might submit implementations for interacting with Aave, and is there essentially like a competition being like, okay, this is a more effective implementation of that, or is it largely like there's one overriding implementation that exists per like lending platform, we'd say?
It's a very good question. So I think we can take a step back. There's three different network participants. One is called an action provider. These are these participants that's coming along to say, here's how you lend an Aave. The second participant is a grapher. They're listening to intent requests being made to the network, traversing all of the actions that are being contributed to find the most optimal path. So maybe if you want to go from USDC to a lending protocol on Aave that requires DAI, you need to account USDC needs to go into DAI first, right? DAI then needs to be deposited into ADAI. Or you can actually swap USDC into ADAI. But this USDC to DAI part, you can go USDC to DAI 50%, 50% to ETH, and then swap those two tokens back onto DAI. And there's like massive combinations. There's over like 100, 150 thousands of combinations that can go to that part. So that's kind of what the graphers are focused on. These are purely mathematicians that do not care where the data is taken from. So mathematicians want data. They don't want to have to scrape the data, clean the data, maintain the data. They can just consume it. So they'll propose their solutions, and there's a competitive part inside of this. So let's say you near a grapher in the network. You say, oh, well, we can take these 5 steps. And I say, well, we can take these 6 steps, and my solution will be more expensive on the gas, but the dollar value at the end will be more. So my solution would be picked. The third participant is a validator. Any contributions added by the action provider will be simulated by the validators to make sure that it can be run. It does what it says. And validators also run underlying opcode verification, so they can check in these actions if approvals have been made, if delegate calls have been made, if transfers, or any malicious behavior for that matter. Whenever a grapher proposes a solution, these validators are also running the call data, validate what the amount out is, what the gas cost is, if it can be executed, if it cannot be executed. So to kind of go back to your question on the action providers, if you and me add Aave Lend, for example, it's very interesting. So developers are incentivized to be the first ones. So you're incentivized to be the first one. Now, the question that may come up is, well, is that domain spotted? If I add it first and then you want to contribute to network and you cannot contribute it, well, there's now a full token economy around this, whereby somebody can stake their Enso token on your contribution. So whenever it goes to be picked of an intent solution has been generated from that contains an Aave Lend, whatever Aave Lend action has the most amount of Enso token staked, then that will be chosen inside of the solution instead of the other one. So then developers can start incentivizing their actions to ensure that they will get the most amount of routes. So the question then would be, what do developers see the most value in? Do they assume there will be the most amount of traffic will go through Aave Lend? Do they think it will go through Morpho Lend? Will it go through Euler Lend? And it creates some degree like a prediction market underneath. Where do we see most of the intent solutions will be derived from for lending? Well, who will have the best market rate? Will people define explicitly the protocol, or will they define just the yield? And then if so, who would then have the best yield? So you've got this whole game theory underneath of the most valuable protocols as well.
Absolutely. And let me try to summarize this for the audience in case anyone was like, okay, they're in intense graphs. Okay. So as I see it, you've got users submitting an intent. Then there's graphers that are going to try to look at all of the underlying action providers. They're going to try to find the best route, we'll say, the best, most effective or cheapest cost. Then validators are going to look at both the grapher solution and the action provider itself, kind of simulate out those routes, validate that they're actually correct and that they're actually doing a good job. and then we'll approve those transactions. And then if there's multiple action providers providing very similar functionality, the person that has staked the most tokens essentially will override or will get a majority of the transactions if there are multiple coming in at the same time.
Yep. The only difference I would say on the validator side is on the action providers, whenever you contribute to the network, they're validating at that point in time. And once it's been contributed of how to know how to interact with Avi, conforming to standards that we build, then it cannot be changed at a later point. So validators only need to check that once, and then validators are checking graphers thereafter.
So let's talk a little bit about, I'm sure this was a very difficult system to put in place. And I'm sure you're also saving people a ton of time because now they don't have to worry about, Uniswap V4s coming out. They don't have to completely overhaul their application for that. Are you seeing a lot of, adoption of the Enso platform and a lot of people are hooking into it?
Yeah. I mean, in the first year of the social trading product, our tooling enabled $8-9 million to go on chain. The DeFi interface second year was $200K. And then now from the infrastructure side, it's been, I think it's 14 billion plus. I can actually check the stats as of today.
Yeah, quite a good adoption. You mentioned social trading. How would you...
15 billion. It's
50 million.
Wow. No, 15 billion.
15 billion. Well, guys, if you're ever hesitant to jump into building on DeFi, let that be a good reminder that there's a good amount of things that can be done here. You mentioned social trading. Could you define that for the audience?
Yeah, I really like this concept of monetizing your knowledge. Is even in some degrees still inside of the Enso network. You're monetizing your knowledge of knowing how to interact with these protocols. You're contributing to the network. The social trading aspect is, I do not have that much money, but I know where to make the money. So if other people invest into what I'm going to invest in, then I can take a percentage. So let's say, for example, I saw Avi $1, right? And I said to you, okay, this is a good project. Maybe you don't know how to invest to it yourself. Maybe you don't want to manage it. Maybe you don't want to set your stop losses. You just want to hand it over to somebody that's able to make good decisions. So you would invest into a smart contract. I would control. You would also control. And then I would buy the Avi token. And then whenever the Avi token goes up or down, then I would sell or buy more, right? If that's a successful trade, I would then get a percentage of the profits. So let's say you put in $100 and there's $100 profit and there's a 20% performance fee. I would then get $20 of that profit. I reflected a lot upon our version 1 of social trading. We didn't build it in the right way. We took too much inspiration from projects that already lived on chain. So there's projects like PyDAO, DHedge, PowerPool, Token Sets, Index Co. And the architecture was better than theirs, but still it wasn't the right architecture. The mistake that was made was writing everything in smart contracts. It's very unnecessary. And all of these actions of how to interact with DeFi could have just been expressed as an intent. Each user could have had their own smart account, and then you could have had Gelato Web3 functions or an automation tool saying, let's say you want to copy trade, you want to follow my trades, right? You could set up a bot that would just listen to what I'm doing in my wallet and then just copy that one for one. So you still have all the funds in your account, you still retain all the control, so do I, and we don't need to build all these manual integrations into DeFi. It minimizes regulation as well if somebody's creating a fund on chain, asset management, and it's just a better architecture. So social trading, I haven't really seen take off in Web3 as of today. A lot of social trading is already done in the backgrounds, like Telegram groups. Some people are sharing with their friends, hey, I saw this shitcoin, maybe you should buy it. So that's kind of social trading. Some people are also checking through Nansen on particular wallets, and they're indirectly copy trading. So there's no tool as of today that's done copy trading properly in the Web3 space.
Yeah,
the
Sam's
Web2 association is eToro, for example.
Yeah, it sounds very similar to the concept. If people listen to the episode with Yorn from flagship.fyi, essentially vaults where you have like a KOL, they maintain a certain index, or if people are familiar with traditional finance, they maintain a certain index, like 20% BTC, 20%, other coins, and then when they can essentially adjust those, and you're essentially like copy and pasting the investment strategy of your favorite KOL or your favorite founder.
Yeah, we've done this. We built that 3 years ago. We released it, and it doesn't have product market fit. And it's just, if you build it in a vault structure, it's the wrong way to build it. Really, there's many teams that are trying to do it today, and we're very fortunate that we are able to support them from the early days, so they don't end up in the same way we did. We spent over $500,000 in audits, and we released it, and we realized the gas cost for the users, the structure of it. Inherently, what's the benefit of creating a vault that other people invest and get a tokenized share of it? There's none. You're able to do the exact same and release that product within 3-4 weeks if you use Enso and you use automation with smart accounts. There's no benefit of kind of creating these indexes and so forth. You can just do pure copy trading from automation. And you can even do like a bucket approval. So probably some of the listeners will say, okay, well, what's the challenge if you've got 100 people copy trading and it's not that gas efficient because 100 people are all individually doing this themselves? Well, you can even create like an approval of your tokens to a master contract, and then this master contract's owned by off-chain agents such as Gelato for Web2 functions that can then call and claim all the tokens from all the accounts at once, and then do the automation of copy trading. So I really would like to see copy trading coming off. There's a lot of opportunity for this, but there's a lot of risk as well, right? If you could get front run. So you have your automations publicly listed or your copy trading listed. It wouldn't really take that much from a searcher or a MEV guy to come along and say, well, I know this is going to happen before it's even happened, so I'm just going to front run all these transactions.
Yeah, you see that in the traditional finances space as well, where you have certain indexes, they have to rebalance based on changes. So you can essentially go in front of certain ETF trades. It depends on how automated everything is and who has I guess in the Web3 space, who has the faster gas costs, and in the traditional finance space, like it's for the high frequency traders who have the faster connections. So let's talk a little bit about, I guess we'll call it general meta concept. So if people listen to the episode with Mina, they know a lot about liquidity fragmentation in the ecosystem. When we're talking with you, it seems like we're talking a lot about like, we'll call it almost like app fragmentation across different chains. How do we see that like Enso is going to be leading to more consolidation? So like if Aave wants to launch on a new chain, they actually no longer necessarily need to launch on that chain because they could use Enso. Do you see that kind of reducing the amount of like app or liquidity fragmentation, or do you still see like all of these major applications will continue to launch on each chain?
So I think the applications will continue to launch on each chain. Our vision is not to enable protocols to deploy on Enso to then deploy on all of the chains. That's not our vision, right? Our vision is allowing application developers to interact with any protocol on any chain. So where there's one source where you can go to and say, I want to interact with this protocol, or I want to obtain this outcome on this chain or that chain. And this outcome could be a DeFi position, a token, an NFT, a state outcome. So a state outcome can be defined if you're interacting with a smart contract that doesn't give you a token or an NFT back or a representation of your interaction. So we do not see protocols that will just deploy in it. So they'll deploy in all the chains they want to, and that will continue. I think there is room for a tool like that says, come to this one place and say, here's my Solidity smart contract. I'm going to be deployed on all these chains. And you can kind of call this a DAS, a deployment as a service, and just create a determiner, but it's a very good idea that was just made up on the spot. So I think we're not doing that, right? So we will have all these protocols deploying on all these different chains, but we consolidate all this information into one place to enable developers to interact. On the liquidity fragmentation, I think Native is doing a really, really good job, and it's a really, really large problem. I think this sits very well in the stack of consolidation of how to interact, and then also what information is there, and then combining all of the liquidity together.
Yeah, it's a very interesting problem, and probably only to become more complex. Hopefully, it will continue to get abstracted away from users. So, I mean, if you try to explain it like normies, like, okay, you buy the funds on Coinbase and you transfer it to Ethereum. Oh, but now you got to bridge it to this thing because your friend doesn't have that. Like, he prefers BNB. It's just a crazy world we live in. And it's every time I have to explain it to a normal person, I forget all of the underlying knowledge that we have layered on top. So I'm sure this was a very difficult product to build. So you've got like graphers you need to attract. You've got action providers you need to attract. And there's validators that need to validate what seems to be relatively complex. What was the most difficult section of building Enso itself?
I can talk about generally maybe from the company, what was some of the most challenging things, right? And some of the most challenging things were pivoting. I love pivots now. I think it's really, really valuable. Some of the most successful companies all came from pivots. Many people that aren't aware of this, Coinbase didn't start off as a crypto exchange. Coinbase started off as a Bitcoin wallet in the early days, and they were doing user testing. Users said, where do I get Bitcoin? And this was an overarching question that was asked. Then Coinbase spent years building a button. That's how Coinbase started, was just one button to buy Bitcoin. And that's how it evolved into this whole exchange today. Slack was internal tool built for a development company. They needed to communicate with each other, and that's how Slack was born. So one of the hardest but the most rewarding was pivoting. And what you start to find out by building your own products is you're not building products for yourself. You're building products for other people to use. And inherently, if they do not align with what you think and they do not use it, then you need to change, because you want to get hundreds of thousands of users and not just one user. And Brian Armstrong represents this as action results in information. So the more you build and the more you do, the more data points you have to make better decisions. So if you're considering to build your own company, just start. You're not going to have your idea fleshed out from beginning. You're not going to have every single step figured out. You just need to start, and then you get more information. So that was one of the hardest, but the most rewarding. On the technical side, was building an architecture that allowed us to integrate with all of DeFi very, very quickly, but safely. That was still, as of today, kind of unheard of, being able to do this at the speed.
Yeah, one of my favorite pivots is if people, everyone watches YouTube. YouTube started as a dating app. They wanted people to upload like videos of themselves and be like, oh yeah, that's a cool person. And they really, it was very funny. And they just found people misusing the platform to upload videos and then made the complete pivot. So let's talk a little bit about, aspiring founders for the Web3 space. So we talk about like, hey, just get started. You're probably going to end up changing your product. What you start with will not be the way you finish. Is there a specific area you feel is underserved in the Web3 space? Like if you weren't working on Enso, you're like, man, maybe somebody should do the, I don't know, we'll call it like app deployment as a service, whatever we had previously coined.
It's a really good question. And since we went through some pivots, we came up with some ideas that still are not tapped into, and we see some people starting them now. So one is DeFi automation. It's really automating all of your positions. And I don't mean DCA. DCA is super easy to build. If USDC ETH goes to this, then acquire USDC. Like that's, if you want to do a hobby project, do that, right? But if you want to build a real DeFi automation tool, I would love to be able to automate 90 or 100 of my DeFi positions to say, if my APY goes down on here, then do this, right? So Avi APYs went down from 7 to 2 and exit my positions over there. The other part of this automation is if I'm in 90 or 100 protocols, I don't have to go to 90, 100 different interfaces every single morning and press the button, claim rewards, claim rewards, claim rewards. I want a system that will say the dollar value of my reward, if it's above this, then claim that and then maybe sell it somewhere, right? It's just like this automation of rebalancing. And again, no one's built this as of today because it's very hard because you needed to build every DeFi integration yourself. But with Enso, you can build this very, very quickly. And all of that logic, you have the automation part built by Gelato and Chainlink and many other people. And then the DeFi part, you've got Enso. So all you need to focus on is the interface. So that's one idea. We experiment a lot with that. We built internal products for it. And we even done some analytics on the front end that we used to have. And everyone was pressing the button automation. You'd be surprised how many people were pressing it. And we even had different sections of claiming rewards, like auto harvesting, rebalancing, DCA, and claiming rewards was number one. You know, nothing was behind the scene. We were just testing to see what people would click on. So there is a need there, actually. I think consumer products are extremely valuable. And I used to think 2 years ago there needs to be a lot more to bring users to this technology. And I do agree with this. However, from us building 2 consumer products, we identify there is so many flaws with infrastructure, or there's just no infrastructure for it. So maybe if you build a consumer product, you'll see. One idea that we did also come up with is if you integrate multiple chains like BSC Scan or RB Scan or Ethereum Block Explorer, it'd be nice if somebody just built a wrapper API around all of them. Wouldn't be that hard, honestly. You could charge a subscription fee to say, call this one, pass in the chain ID, and then they would then call the underlying APIs to get all the information from Etherscan and so forth. Copy trading, really? This would be really, really cool, copy trading. Yeah, some ideas.
Yeah. So to all the builders, there's a ton of opportunity, and you shouldn't come to Web3 and be like, man, everything's built out. I would say very few things are built out, and we're definitely all trying our best. Let's talk about some of the biggest challenges as a founder. Do you find it to be, the underlying product development? Do you find it marketing, fundraising, like building a community? I guess you guys don't have a token, so you're not as adherent to the whims of the markets or the underlying like token price.
Mm-hmm. I think that you're not building the product for yourself. That's what I said earlier. And a lot of people need to accept that. I see many founders around me that couldn't accept that, and they decided to forego their company and shut it down and return some investor funds. The other biggest challenge, I would say, is just being consistent. You really need to just keep pushing. You can't give up. That's the whole job as a founder, right? You need to stay motivated. You need to keep the company aligned with the same vision of, even if the vision changes, you need to keep everyone aligned and moving forward. On the 3 topics you said, I think the largest one for me would be marketing, truthfully. That's my downfall. I was a person that never used social media, right? So I'm doing some of the marketing at Enso. It's not the best. So that's something that I needed to learn. And a lot of it is really just getting comfortable with the unknown. I thoroughly enjoy that myself, of going into areas that I never understood before. And as a founder, you need to get very, very comfortable. I define it as being an intern, doing an internship in every single part of the company. And you don't have 3 months for an internship, you have like 1 hour. So you need to learn very quickly about all these parts of this part of the organization to be able to make a good decision.
Yeah, it's an incredibly difficult undertaking to start a company. Even just from I do mostly media stuff, so everything is hard, but just get started. It's totally worth it. So let's talk a little bit about the intent engine and how you kind of see Enso, where it will go in the next few years, if you can predict it, and what kind of impact it will have on the general Web3 space.
One thing on the last person I would say, anyone considering to do your own company, do it. you will start to see the truth of the world. That's how I like to define it. If you work for somebody else, you're always a bit sheltered from what's happening. Where if you do your own, you get to see the reality of how companies operate, all the great things, the bad things that arise from it. So on your question of where Enso is going and how it's going to change the ecosystem.
Exactly.
Again, I don't really define this. Users define if what we build is useful, but we've already got that product market fit. Like we have 35 plus projects using as in production. Things are working. We've got high daily volume and so forth. So with the Enso, to kind of expand on where we are, all developer interactions in the future will be intent-based. All of them. Whether that's an NFT, a DeFi position, state, or a token, or interacting with the blockchain, developers should not need to build every integration themselves. They should just express what they want for their users, and all of that logic will be abstracted away. So Enso will turn into this full middle layer. This is a map of knowing how to interact with every single smart contract on every single chain. So it will be a whole new framework for building applications that really brings the core value of blockchain for me, which is composability. Being able to compose many different products together all within one place. It's a convenience product but on steroids.
Absolutely. And we're about to come up on the hour, so I want to be very cognizant of your time. Are there any exciting like milestones or use cases you want to highlight that people can be looking forward to?
Yeah, I mean, the Enso network is going to go live in about 2 months. So, if you do want to be a contributor to the network, you can come along to our Discord, or you can come to our Telegram chat. And the Telegram chat is Enso_intent_engine. So if you don't want to contribute actions, or you want to be a validator, or you want to be a grapher, just come along. On the milestone side, yeah, I mean, if people need new DeFi protocols integrated, just let us know and we can help you on this journey.
Absolutely. So also shout out where people can connect with you on social media. I'll put all the links in the description.
Yeah. Enso Finance on Twitter. That's kind of our main source.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining. I hope all the listeners get a ton of value. I know I personally did out of this interview. So start building on the Enso network, start building in DeFi, and thank you for listening to another episode of the Building Web3 podcast.